had this idea for a video like last week, but I haven't had the energy to record it, but today I do. So I'm gonna do that and try to stick to all the notes that I wrote and not have this be like an hour long, but it might be. It might be. So I want to talk about why the quarantine can be harmful for introverts, even though there's kind of a sentiment going around that it's actually the introverts who are thriving right now because this is what we're used to. But I don't feel that way. And I think that other people might agree with me on this. We'll see. But I want to dive into why it can actually potentially be a harder time for introverts than people who consider themselves extroverted. So let me sort of talk about how this has affected me, and then we'll talk about it in a broader sense. So I am taking this semester off because I was burnt out. I won't get into that, but but yeah, I'm taking this semester off. And before the quarantine started in March, I was leaving my house like once a day to get coffee or go to the grocery store, pick up my meds, see a friend for lunch. Like one of those things a day. Sometimes I wouldn't make it out, but I tried to. And maybe every other week I would like meet up with a closer friend for a slightly longer amount of time, and then that would, I would be good for a couple weeks. Like I went to a party in January and I'm only just now recovering from that. My energy is really depleted due to being an introvert, having depression, having chronic fatigue that I'm trying to figure out the cause of, and I'm finding out that it's probably due to a health condition. So doing anything that requires other humans to see me and process my existence very quickly saps the little physical and mental energy that I have. And so it's like, why am I not thriving right now? Why is the quarantine taking such a toll on my mental well-being? I can't leave the house, so I should have more energy to do other stuff, right? I should be able to get in on the trend of people working on like self-improvement during the quarantine, right? Well, no, that didn't happen. So let's talk about why that didn't happen. So we've all seen an influx of relatable quarantine content, like on Twitter, and I mean pretty much any social media platform, but particularly Twitter, which I'm pretty new to. I've seen like, haha, I've been practicing social distancing my whole life. Quarantining myself, you mean my life in high school? Like, I never leave the house anyway. My life hasn't changed. And I assume that due to the high volume of this content that some people actually feel this way. And honestly, I'm happy for them. However, I kind of suspect that many of the people making and responding positively to this kind of content are either not as isolated as they claim to be, or not as isolated as they themselves think that they are. And I mean, it's clear that humor is often used as a coping mechanism by people who are suffering. So maybe that's what these people are doing. But it's also easier for people who don't suffer from the thing that they're joking about to make those relatable jokes about any certain issue. Like, a girl who doesn't have anxiety wearing an "my anxieties have anxieties" t-shirt, like that kind of thing. So yeah, I do want to acknowledge that introverts don't necessarily hate all social interaction, and extroverts don't necessarily love all social interaction. There are people in between, even called ambiverts, that consider themselves both. But even besides that, everyone is unique and has different social needs. There's a reason that I was actively trying to leave the house every day. Not seeing other people, even just in passing, I think can be detrimental to anyone, regardless of how antisocial they might consider themselves. But when you look at these groups as a whole, it's kind of hard to deny that they often relate to each other over similar likes and dislikes in terms of social situations and activities that they like to do. We've all kind of seen the slightly cringy internet culture around introverts that involves like sweaters, tea, rain, baking, social awkwardness, and being a not like other girls kind of girl. And I could do a whole video about that culture and how and why it came to be. But for now, I'll just use it as like proof that self-identified introverts and presumably extroverts, though they probably talk about it offline, share similar traits. So extroverts. Extroverts don't see socialization as a chore, rather as a normal and enviable thing that is a natural part of their everyday life. Introverts tend to see socialization as also as valuable, but in much smaller doses. It's concentrated, and I've been trying to come up with some situations to compare this to. You could think of every social interaction being like chocolate, and introverts are they're those people that are like, oh my god, I can only have one bite of this chocolate cake, like it's too rich. Like they're those kinds of people. And extroverts like love it, they thrive, they'll have the whole dessert. And you know, they're the kinds of people that are just like ready for more, much faster than like an introvert would be. And I feel like in the same way that introverts can suffer from being too isolated, I do kind of wonder if extroverts can like OD on human interaction, kind of like having too much of a good thing. Like when I was 8 and I OD'd on dark chocolate Lindt truffles and then I threw up and then I didn't want any more for a very long time. Yeah, but I don't know how good that analogy is. I think a better example is the social needs meter in The Sims. Like all meters in The Sims, the meter will decrease or increase depending on what you're doing, whether you're meeting up with friends or your sim has been in the house for like a week, alone. And the meters have different rates that they can fill, and I think also that they can decrease at. So if you think about an introvert and an extrovert, both in the same situation, both with the same length of like social needs meter, for the introvert, that meter is going to fill a lot more quickly, and their social needs are going to be met long before the extrovert's social needs. Even something as simple as going to a coffee shop and having the barista like acknowledge your existence can fill social needs for an introvert. And for the extrovert, they may need a longer social interaction or interaction with more people in order for their meter to fill, because the same situation is just not as fulfilling for them. And The Sims also has an energy meter, which you can imagine going down more quickly for an introvert during social situations and more slowly for an extrovert. And so here's how we can relate that back to the quarantine. Extroverts are used to having to constantly arrange sufficient interaction to fill their social needs. They're used to reaching out to friends, and they probably have a larger social network than an introvert. Not that either is, better or worse. It's just like totally different styles of living. Something as simple as going to a coffee shop probably barely registers at all with an extrovert's social needs. And that's why losing the ability to do small things like that potentially isn't as detrimental to them. An extrovert might not like sitting at home all the time, but because they're used to socializing, they might not find it very hard to arrange certain replacements like video chat or spending time with roommates or family, stuff like that. And not only do introverts often have a smaller group of friends that they interact with, but it might be harder for introverts to arrange that social time at all. And let's face it, Zoom calling with your friends and family is not only exhausting, but it's not as socially fulfilling as seeing people in person. In addition, being at home all the time is so different than being out all the time that introverts might actually find a certain novelty and interest in the things that you can do at home, like learning to bake or cook, knitting, or other crafts and activities normally associated with homebodies. And if you're already at home and used to doing those things like I am, and nothing ends up changing for you, and the small visits with friends or errand running trips that you were doing to add variety to your day and just have somebody else perceive you are gone, suddenly your days just become very dull and hold almost no interest at all. And that's kind of how I've been feeling, and I would be really interested to know if other introverts are also feeling this too. So to conclude, while extroverts went from more constant contact with people to a life with very little of that, it's not like introverts went to their opposite, which would be seeing lots of people and having lots of interaction. We got our little concentrated but valuable interaction almost totally stripped away. And while it may be an adjustment for them, extroverts may actually benefit from having some time to check in with themselves and their needs and having some introspective time, just like introverts can benefit from meeting new people and having new social experiences, even if both of those things are hard for extroverts or introverts to want to do. And I'll admit that this analysis may not be perfect. If the situation were reversed and suddenly no one could stay home, I think that introverts might have a really hard time with that. However, I also feel that there's a possibility it'd be a similar situation where introverts are able to adjust or even benefit from the temporary change while extroverts suffer because their only alone or rest time would be taken away in that situation. Because when it comes down to it, everyone needs a balance of social time and time to yourself. And if you're an extrovert and you're having a really hard time right now, or you're an introvert that's having like a fine time right now, those experiences are completely valid. And this was just kind of something I wanted to, throw at the wall and see if anybody else feels the same way, because I think that they probably do. I feel like I can't be the only introvert being like, this has been really, really hard for me. Like, those little trips out of the house, they were small, but they were a big part of my life. So because they were such a big part of my life, now that they're gone, like, it's like, what do I do with my days? I already know how to bake and all of that. Anyway, let me know if anybody has another thought about this. And yeah, I would just love to hear that. And you can give this video a thumbs up, you can give it a thumbs down. Not that I need to tell people that. They're, if they want to, they'll do it. But whatever reaction you have, let me know. Alright, thanks for watching.